And this is an English translation of the prayer on the Geeta, the introductory prayer. And there's always, in all of these teachings, there's always the introductory prayer. The Shanti mantras are that, the Shanti mantras that we chanted together from the 13 primary Upanishads. And those are the prayers at the beginning of each of them. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us, O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. And the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay, do we remember? We ended yesterday with the question. You remember what the question was? We said we'd come back to it this morning. So, to this point, all of the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita has been covered. Lord Krishna's taught everything. But, of course, he actually taught everything in the second chapter. He taught of nature of self and briefly how to come into union with the self, capital S self, not little s self. Yes? In chapter 2. So, and then he's done it again. And he's extolled karma yoga and renunciation and wisdom. So he's extolled all three, and also meditation. So Raja Yoga is here. We're here with the Raja Yoga chapter right now. So he's covered all the 4 yogas by now. Do we notice? Those of us that have been in this for a while? So, and what does Arjuna ask? And by the way, he's not just covered the 4 paths of yoga. So yes, everyone. So karma yoga, selfless service. Yes? Okay. Renunciation of the fruits, tyaga. So that is a concept that exists with karma yoga. Jnana yoga. Bhakti yoga, yes. Devote to me. Yeah. The yoga of devotion chapter is yet to come. Discourse. And then, and I know you're listening, you're waiting until you hear what was that question. I'm giving you an opportunity.
What is the best?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
So we did this yesterday morning. And you check in on your awareness, by the way. You check in and see how well you're checking in. See how well you're listening. What was the question? Yes.
I remember it was that big cliffhanger.
It's a big cliffhanger. Arjuna said, this yoga of equanimity is what?
Steadiness or...
Steadiness of mind?
Yes.
Yeah. So everything he's been teaching to this point is about coming to steadiness of mind. Why?
You just need it to make proper decisions.
Yeah, in order to reveal the intuition. Right? In order to unveil wisdom.
At peace.
In order to be at peace, in order to unveil the bliss. So he talked about, as he's extolling here, he talked about the yogi who practices such, comes into the bliss of the self, yes?
Yes.
So, okay, that's why equanimity of mind. dear Lord. So, yes, do you want equanimity of mind? Do you have equanimity of mind?
No.
Oh.
Yes, no.
Yes, no. And so that's the question. The question that we ended with yesterday. This yoga of equanimity taught by thee, O Krishna, I do not see its steady continuance. Where?
In the mind.
In my mind, yes. Because of the restlessness of the mind. The mind verily is restless, turbulent, strong, and unyielding, O Krishna. I deem it as difficult to control as to control the wind. So that's the question. Here it's asked more in the form of a question, so this translation is a bit more like this. Then Arjuna spoke, Krishna, you say that equanimity of mind is yoga, but I do not see how that is possible, because the mind by nature is constantly changing. Not only is it restless, Krishna, the mind is often turbulent and powerfully obstinate. Trying to control the mind is like trying to control the wind. Does that make sense? So we see it even, we'll read the commentary here from Swami Venkatesananda. But the reason it takes us a while to come back to this is because, why? If the mind were your faithful servant right now, why is it that this important point would be apart from you? Right? So the mind is all over the place. Ragadvesha. The mind has become completely objectified. And so, and even in its imaginations, in its imaginings, it's about where is that thing that I want? And the problems, the things that are happening to me right now. So, and this is not blame. It's not a blame game. It's not saying that somebody's bad. This is our own mind that's not serving us as nicely as we want it to serve us. Is it so? Because the difference between happiness and anger or greed or fear or any of these, the one difference is what? It's the state of the mind. That's all it is. That's all it is. Happiness is not in the external circumstance. It's not in the thing that happens to you. It's inside. Where is it? It's inside, right? Is it someplace else? Do you have experience with it being inside?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and therefore, why am I upset in this moment? If you inquire, why am I not feeling so good right now? Why am I not present right now? If you inquire, you get one answer. What is the answer?
Mind.
This mind, it's all over the place. It seems to be more related to the things out there than it is related to the peace inside. It seems to be more interested in being disturbed than in being equanimous. Does that make sense? Something happens out there, we sit here and we're just fine. We sit here for meditation. And by the way, if someone gets up, everyone will hear it because, we're really enjoying this place of silence and being in this quiet, peaceful space and uplifted space. But then if something happens,
I sneezed.
then everybody's attention will come to it. And somebody's mind will say, you should leave the room.
That was me.
Thank you. Thank you for making this real. So, Jai. So that's the mind. And And so the problem that was causing the lack of equanimity was not actually the sneeze, was it? Thank you, Kalidas. That was perfect timing. Case in point, that's the illustration of what we're dealing with. So this is what Arjuna is observing. He's saying, I hear you, and this sounds beautiful. But what you're telling me is I can't fix the guy in front of me. I have to fix myself. And that's so difficult to do. This is real. Huh? That I can't fix the situation. I have to change the mind in order to have equanimity. This is what he's saying, is it? Yeah, so, I mean, be present, be real with this, right? Recognize it. At some point, we have to be where Arjuna is here, because Arjuna he's raising an objection, and Krishna will answer the objection or answer the question, and the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, of course, is devoted to this point, this one point, this point that Arjuna is raising. The rest of it is devoted to this. Actually, the first part of it has been as well. So how to deal with this? Because we go through life and here. So sufferings, we all experience sufferings. The mind will say that the suffering is the cause of someone who said something to you. And as long as it does that, you are a victim. And there's no peace for you. So, and that's not casting blame. That's just an observation. That's what Krishna is saying this, but also saying, but there's a way out of that terrible cycle. There's a way out of it. But we all find ourselves as victims as long as we suffer from this. Where the mind objectifies, it places happiness outside and a required set of conditions that it puts upon you, which you have to achieve based on controlling your outside circumstances in order to have the happiness that you seek. The mind is a terrible master, but this is what it does. And so Arjuna, upon hearing this, says, I hear you, but controlling this mind is like controlling the wind. Can you relate? Right? We try, we seem like we get some success at it sometimes. And then the next test comes. Achoo! And the mind says, COVID! Or whatever. Okay. Swamiji. Anyone who has endeavored to fix the mind knows how difficult it is. If the object of our attention is outside and sensuously attractive or sensuously unattractive, it's the same, perhaps it compels our attention. Anyone who has tried to focus the attention on an idea or an ideal within oneself will appreciate what Arjuna says here. So, for example, you say to yourself, your ideal is, I will be undisturbed today. Has anyone ever done this? Nothing that happens to me today will cause me to be disturbed. I know that I am the master of my own happiness. And so I shall remain in this place all day, no matter what happens. And of course, the universe, having heard this, will provide opportunities to test and see how you're doing with that. Have we experienced?
I have.
I told myself I was going to have a happy day the next day, and that actually worked, but I forgot to do that ever since then.
Oh, well, you have to start there,
Yeah.
by the way, because you have to have the tests also.
Yeah.
So the tests will steal you up, and this is where Krishna goes with this. But so an otherwise passive mind becomes suddenly active when something happens, right? So it's fine. I'm sitting here in meditation. Somebody sneezes, and now it's not passive. Now it's not steady any longer. Now it's like somebody threw a rock in the pond, the lake of the mind, and ripples, maybe tidal waves. The otherwise placid lake of the mind becomes agitated, and the mind takes us further away from the inner ideal than we ever imagined it could. The power of delusion, of ignorance, of animal desires and instincts is so strong that any attempt at controlling the mind is seriously resented by the mind. And that's, when we come to ashram, for example, this is why, the first week seems glorious, and the second week is pretty good, and the third week is really, these people, they don't know what they're asking for. And the fourth week, it's like, I gotta get out of here. This is why. Because the need of the day is to control what doesn't want to be controlled. And by the way, some people will say that the purpose of spiritual life and the practice is not to control the mind, it is to observe the mind. And you can say that. But why to observe the mind? I mean, if you observe the mind holding a gun to someone's head and pulling the trigger, how is that? How is that? How did that feel? So actually, you observe the mind as a practice in order to bring the light to the mind, in order to control the mind. So awakening is steady intellect. Awakening is marked by steady intellect and equanimous mind. So one way or another, and it is a practice, it is a valid practice. It is a practice. But the mind has to be concentrated, it has to be single-pointed. And by the way, if we don't do that, then we miss the greatest opportunity to be of service, to be of benefit in this world. Because if we can't corral these negative thoughts, which have great power, then we get stuck in them and we're constantly sharing them as well. So Lord Krishna says very clearly, needs to be done. Okay. So the power of delusion, of ignorance, of animal desires and instincts is so strong that any attempt of controlling the mind is seriously resented by it. It is the experience of many that, he quotes, since beginning to concentrate and meditate, the inner impurities seem to have grown. We seem to be further from God now than before we even thought about him. It is good to know that it is a step towards God, a sign of progress. The inner devil has been disturbed, shaken from his complacent existence as the Lord of our inner world. Like an angry cat at bay, he is now fighting with his back to the wall. He is cornered. The fight is hard and long drawn, but let us fight the good fight with faith in the Lord. For once the mind itself is offered at the feet of the Lord to serve him, it will become our best friend. This is the symbolism of Hanuman. And he adds, the son of wind. Hanuman is the son of the wind, if we remember that from Ramayana, etc. And wind and the mind are actually the same. So only the M, he says, is upside down. The wind symbolizes the mind, the state of the uncontrolled mind. And uncontrolled means the mind controls us. And we should be honest about that. So we say, I want this, I want freedom. Freedom is to do as I will, but you can try to do as you will, and you can see if that brings you happiness. It's fine. It might not. It might just bring you more suffering. But it seems like each of us have to try it. We have to try that freedom that we think. But what we discover is, my God, now I have all the money I want. Well, you can never actually do that. You can try. I'm poster child for that. But you can never actually have all that you want because you will never be satisfied by money or power or even by trying to get away. You can't be satisfied because it's an endless, it's a hamster wheel. You get something, it doesn't provide satisfaction. as long as you continue to accept that the thing, such as money or sex or power or anything else, is going to give you happiness someday, then the problem will be, I don't have enough of it. Or what I have is not good enough. This woman is not good enough. This man is not good enough. This job is not good enough. This place to live is not good enough. And so we'll go someplace else. But then what happens? As long as the mind continues to be in charge, what happens?
Same thing.
It's just the same thing playing out over and over again, right? Yeah? So, and then finally it'll switch gears and it'll say, okay, well, it's not money. It's such and such. And really, bull in the china shop, it's like getting hauled around. And so fine, and it will become obstinate too, by the way. It'll say, and it will absolutely rebel. It will scream at people. Have you ever experienced that, Kalidas? It will tell people how stupid they are, what idiots they are, how they should know better, because it's right in front of your face. It will do the most terrible things, all in the name of seeking that happiness. And what we discover is, at some point, invariably, oh my God, I don't really know where it is. Invariably. Huh? After we've done what mayhem? By the way, we've done a lot. Shankaracharya says 100 billion well-lived births to get here. So there are three roles in this world. There's the victim role, which we can relate to and understand, will pop up. It'll come in our own mind because it will objectify this suffering, this hurt. It'll say, it's your fault. You said this to me, won't it? They did this, and that was the terrible thing, and I just can't get over it. As soon as those words come, I can't get over it. Oh my God, next birth. Unless you get over it. You see that? As long as you stick with that, I will not allow this to happen to me. Next birth. Really? Then you'll just die in misery. If you can't get over it, if you can't accept it. Is it so? Yeah. Then there's no happiness for you if you can't accept it. Because as soon as you say, I can't accept this, what will the universe do?
Give you more of it.
It'll give you it. That's the power of attraction. Because now you're fixated on it. What does the power of attraction say? Anyone who studied Power of Attraction years ago or recently. It says whatever you think about will come to you. Is it correct? Universe doesn't understand positive, negative. Doesn't understand you don't want it because you're thinking about it all the time. It thinks you want it. That's the way it would be said in Power of Attraction. Yeah? So you say, I cannot allow this. And anytime something happens, the mind, this is the mind, the uncontrolled mind, you see, it will consider whether this might be it because there's such a terrible fear of it, right? We're in COVID time, we see it. So as soon as somebody sneezes, that mind will come with the idea of that's COVID. Yes?
Yes.
You suppose that's so?
Yes.
Oh. And so, and you're saying, I will not allow myself to get it. I will not place myself in a situation where I might get it. And so that will be so strong that of course it'll come. You'll call it to you. Oh. Because the mind will be fixated on it. So this is a friendly mind? It's a friendly mind? Does it make sense that this mind is controlling us? It's not the other way around. So, but then what he points out is on spiritual path, when we do set about and we say new rules, we say, okay, my dear mind, I love you, but I am not following you anymore. You took me here and there, and look at where we are. Our life is in a shambles. You led me into this great depression. I love you. I really do, dear mind. I really, really, really love you. But love does not mean I will follow you. Because I love you, I am going to choose to help you to come to the light. I'm going to choose to help you to have equanimity. I'm going to choose to help you to accept what happens, to accept the situation we're in. Not to get angry when somebody says something about you. This is what I'm going to choose. And when we choose that, then, now I'm watching you, my dear mind. And then it really gets tough. Does that make sense? Does that make sense too?
Yes.
Then it really gets tough. As soon as you start watching over it, and you start correcting it.
Yeah.
We see this with all of the addictions, right? It's the same thing, isn't it? With the addictive behaviors. Yeah? So drugs, alcohol, sex, anything, whatever it is. Anger. Anger is an addiction too, isn't it? Denial. These are all addictive behaviors. And we see it. It's easier, we should say, with drugs and alcohol, etc., because the society will see that as well, and as mirrors will help us to see that I can't do this. Anger and such, it might be a little bit more challenging because there's not a bottle in the hand, there's not a needle in the arm like this. But you see, when you resolve to stop that addictive behavior, whatever it is, you see, as soon as you resolve, it actually gets harder. And that the mind will somehow seem to get more creative in its ideas about why you need that drink than it used to. If Hara were here, he would relate to this. So he says, that fight is hard and long drawn, but let us fight the good fight with faith in the Lord. But once the mind itself is offered at the feet of the Lord to serve him, it will become our best friend. And then he gives the example of Hanuman. He says, the restless monkey, the mind, is invincible, wise and heroic, and is able to work wonders once it is made to serve the mind, once the Lord, once the mind is turned into a servant instead of a master. And so here's where Krishna starts to answer. The Blessed Lord said, undoubtedly, O mighty armed Arjuna, the mind is difficult to control and restless, but by practice and by dispassion it may be restrained. And then Krishna adds this, Shloka 36. I think yoga is hard to be attained by one of uncontrolled self, but the self-controlled and striving one can attain to it by the proper means. So state of yoga, again, is defined as union with one's highest self. It's also earmarked by bliss, wisdom, freedom, eternal life. So state of yoga is a state. Just a couple of days ago, we got this definition of yoga about the cessation of union with
The mind.
pain.
Yes.
Cessation of union with pain. Do we remember that? You might not have been in the morning. You remember it. Cessation of union with pain. You were here. So yoga is the cessation of union with pain. We can take it that way. All pain. All pain. We can hear it described to us as a positive state, which is recognition of one's own highest nature, union with one's own highest nature. So this. But also this definition was given to us as cessation from the union with pain. And that was in this discourse. So Lord Krishna says, I think he's giving an opinion that yoga, this state, is hard to be obtained by one of uncontrolled mind or self. One who does not have control of themselves, very hard. Because why? If one doesn't have control of one's reactive tendencies,
those are the things that rule you.
yeah, then something happens, and where did the bliss go? We all have this experience. Something happens, and where did the bliss go? If peace is inside, and if each of us have experience with peace being inside, is it so? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then why would you choose not to always be at peace? Would you intentionally make a choice not to always be at peace? Would you intentionally make a choice not to always be happy? Regardless of what happened, would you intend that? Would you say, I'd rather not be happy all the time? Anyone?
No.
Would you say, I'd rather not be at peace all the time? It's a very funny question because there's an aspect of you that says, yes, I would rather not be at peace.
Or it just says, oh,
And we'll fight.
I'm just used to it.
And we'll fight for that.
Oh, I'm used to this hell. Oh, this is all hell. That's it.
And there is a part. There is a part.
This is all hell.
And as long as that part is not brought into the fold,
What stood out for me, Swamiji, is you said it's hard to attain. You didn't say it's impossible.
yeah.
Why is that?
And then he continues and says, but the self-controlled and striving one can attain to it by the proper means. He's saying, in this infinite world, anything can happen. But I think it's very hard to find it unless you control yourself.
Right.
Here he's speaking as a friend. Because anything can be argued, to be honest. But he's saying this is the proper means. I'm sharing with you the proper means. And what does that mean? I'm sharing with you the means by which if you follow, then you will achieve. And that's always in the teachings of the Gita and the Upanishads as well. Trusting the teaching, memorizing the teaching without actually discovering what it is that the teaching is pointing to won't be a shield. It won't ultimately protect us. We have to follow the teaching. We have to find what it is it's pointing to and realize it in ourselves and realize it around us as well. Right? Just repeating it like a mantra won't do, but following it. And the Lord is quite assuring in this way that if you actually do it, and here Abhyasa Yoga is what he's recommending, which is constant effort. Here's what, and we'll close here shortly. But here's the translation here, and then we'll read this commentary. Swamiji, this 36, Swami Satchidananda translates it this way. This is Lord Krishna, but it gets translated a little differently. The words will get put together a little bit differently. Success in yoga, or self-realization, is extremely difficult if you cannot control your mind. But if you persist and control your mind and earnestly strive for realization using the right methods, you will certainly be successful. Arjuna says to Sri Krishna, the mind is continuously turbulent. Don't you think it's difficult to control? Krishna agrees. No doubt it's very difficult to control, which probably gives Arjuna a little consolation. Then he continues, but if you have both abhyasa and vairagya, so constant effort and dispassion, you can do it. Yes, it's very hard to control the mind, but just remember, by continuous practice and enough non-attachment, certainly it can be controlled. It's difficult, but it is possible. That's the beauty of it. What's the use of doing anything that's too easy? Anybody can do it. He says the glory comes only when you can do something others can't easily do. And it is possible to achieve anything if you practice continuously, not just one day a week or 5 minutes in the mornings and evenings, while the rest of the time you do anything you want. And by the way, that's embodied. Anywhere you look, those that are really highly successful have chosen with very strong resolve to be successful. Is it so?
Yes.
Yeah. The great concert pianist, the great opera singer, the great company CEO, whatever field of pursuit it is, the great general, you think it was an accident? All of these masters, you think any of them got accidentally enlightened? They were just sitting around and it just happened. Reading the life stories of the saints is very helpful in that way. It's inspiring, and it also helps us to be real with ourselves. To see that the stuff that we deal with in daily life is not different than the stuff that they dealt with in daily life. Swami Shivananda will constantly recommend studying the lives of the saints for this reason. Because everyone here is a saint in the making. It's a question about the choices that we make. It's not about what happens to us. Not about what happens to us. It's about the choices that we make when what happens, happens. What resolves do we take? Do we stick with it? That's abhyasa. Do we stick with it? Do we stay the course? For how long? As long as it takes. So it's possible to achieve anything if you practice continuously. Does that make sense? Is it so?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not just a little bit. Who was I with? Oh, we'll come back and to that same question tomorrow morning. I mentioned that I was with Hayan. So I don't know, Kalidas, if you met Hayan in travels. He's been out a few times. He's another walker. So Hayan's father is quite inspiring. Hayan's father is he worked as a physician for a long, long time. He's retired now, and he plays Hindustani music. He doesn't practice a lot, but he talked about the greats that he learned from when he was learning, and he was schooled for about 16 years while he was working. So it was who could say an area of service or an area of interest for him. And so his teacher, his guru in Hindustani music, in harmonium and such, was a master. And here's what Abu is Hayan's father's name. Here's what Abu said about that. Talking with reverence about his master, he said he practiced 8 hours a day, every day. That's not including the performances and the teaching and all of that. That's in addition to. He says he practiced 8 hours a day. And when he said that, every day he practiced. And that's what allowed him to be great and to be revered as a great teacher. Swami Shivananda, you think abhyasa yoga? Yeah. 8 years after he came back from Malaysia, and he realized that I'm not who I take myself to be. And he realized that sadhana was the way, that he had to go deep. So he was one day with the guru, gunpowder student, and all of this. Was he self-realized on the spot? Well, he did realize something. He did realize that there was a higher truth. He had a good idea of what it was. So does that mean he just came back to India and taught?
Not yet.
Not yet. 8 years. Like the Buddha, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 years he came back and sadhana. So chop wood, carry water, yes, absolutely. That, a lot of that, so much karma yoga, because he was given a piece of land that had to be cleared. The cowshed had to be cleaned out. So much karma yoga. But then on top of that, hours of meditation every day, hours of chanting. He slept 3 hours, something like that. So motivated. And what came from it? What was the fruit? What was the fruit?
Spreading yoga to the world.
Bliss. Absolute bliss. Wisdom. You suppose wisdom? 300 books?
Yeah.
Every one of them perfect?
Was he reading a lot?
Because he was the source of wisdom. He became one with the source of wisdom. And that source of wisdom spouted through him. His mind, his body were an open mouth, an open channel.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so that's what's being pointed to here.
So are you saying that we could have this too?
Of course. You are this already. What did Jesus say? You want to go to a different tradition?
I and the Father are one.
And you can do all of this and more. Huh? Of course. He didn't just say, I and the Father are one. He said, you and the Father are one.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, okay. We should close. Any questions, comments, anything before we close? We can take a couple of minutes. This gets to the very practical aspect. The very practical aspect. It's so practical.
I remember Hari and I reading this section a couple weeks ago.
Yes, please. Yeah.
And when we read it, there were a couple people that came to mind. One was sports figures, very successful sports figures like Michael Jordan, or all of these people who have these championships. It's because they had that steady practice and that dispassion. They were so one-pointed in their focus. And the other person that came to mind was Bobby Fischer. Some of us might remember Bobby Fischer back in chess jumping back in the 1970s. He was another one who would practice
Constantly
chess
practice.
all the time. And he took on basically the whole Russia. And Russia had so many grandmasters working together trying to defeat this guy because they saw that he was coming up and he was going to take their position. But he had so much of that focus, steady practice, didn't let date, didn't go with the women, didn't allow any distractions. He was just totally committed. And then his time came. He worked at it for like 12 years, and he was so ticked off that the Russians had beat him back in the 60s because he felt that they were conspiring against him, coming up with strategies so that he would not take first place. And later it was proved that was true. But then he just kept at it. And over 12 years, his time came in 1972.
So would you also call that a test then?
Yes, totally.
And was it required? Was that test required for him to be successful?
Yes. Yes.
So it's the same in spiritual path.
Yes.
The difference with spiritual path is now one is wanting to exert towards that which is greater. At some point, this discussion between Lord Krishna and Arjuna on this question, it's like, when Arjuna says, I hear you, but controlling this mind is so difficult, it's like the wind. Just as a very practical question, how about trying to control your neighbor? How about trying to control the things that happen to you during the day? How easy is that?
It might be easier.
Yeah. So another way to paraphrase Krishna's answer is, yeah, but at least this you can do. At least with abhyasa, with steady effort, you can control your mind.
Right. And in this way,
So what else to do?
it's the only thing that makes sense. Really, it's the only thing that makes sense.
It's the only thing that can be done, and it makes imminent sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the world that we live in, especially in the world of psychology, is that to try to control all the external forces, or to make yourself, to wall yourself in, put boundaries around yourself so that you can control what comes in.
To cut yourself off, to create these boundaries. And then invariably we're going to discover that we're actually cutting ourselves off from ourselves. That the solitude is not the same as the solitude that I'm really wanting to find.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We long for union, not separation. But we imagine that separation is a way to separate ourselves from suffering. And however, there's no satisfaction there, just practically speaking. There's a kind of peace, but no satisfaction. In other words, the longing doesn't stop. The longing for that which is higher doesn't stop. So one way or another, we keep getting brought back to this same essential fact, which is I have to bring my own self, my own inner environment into control. I can't control the outer environment, but I can control the inner environment. Yogananda's beautiful quote, he says, the yogi must be still in the midst of crashing worlds. And so, like this. And that asteroid is coming. I heard, by the way, it's entering the Earth's atmosphere very soon. I did hear that. I checked the news. Swami's with it. So, it is. It's coming. It absolutely could strike the Earth. Sorry?
Oh, your space program technology, they could easily deflect that and shoot it down.
Yeah, but there will be a bigger one coming. Oh, thank you, Dharmashan. Catastrophe will always strike. If it's not that, then it'll be a huge tidal wave. Oh, and global warming. Let's not forget global warming.
There might be a huge tidal wave, yeah.
And one way or another, you suppose it'll be possible you'll be on your deathbed someday. Possible? Likely?
Imminent.
I mean, the reality of the situation we're placed in is we have no control about it. Worse than trying to control the wind, right?
So Swami, you mentioned earlier about union with, and how I heard it was union with suffering.
Cessation of the union with suffering, or cessation of the union with pain.
In that was the union with suffering.
Which is,
So,
yeah.
Yoga is the cessation. So it's union and union again, but the union is this idea that suffering has merit.
Yeah.
That there's a reason for it, and letting go of that merit and recognizing that we can be, at peace if we let go of it.
Yeah. Beautiful. And practically speaking, we always have the need to be in union with something. If we can talk dispassion, and we can talk about letting go, but the reality is that we're going to have to find something to hold on to, right, in order to let go. Because if you let go and just drift in the wind, that's a very uncomfortable situation as well. You're going to try to hold on to something. So finally, the requirement for us is to let go of what's temporal and hold on to what's eternal.
The blessing of COVID, for me anyhow, is
Yes.
seeing how the presentation of the infinite facets that there are, all the possibilities that there are that are distractions, and to try to come to a place to realize what is not a distraction.
Oh.
What actually you can hold on to, and it will take you where you really want to go.
Which is that same eternal, which is called by many names, which is inside and outside. Which is Om. Okay, we should close. Page 174, but we're just trying to do the short, so we can just be present for it. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritat. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritat. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in thee forever and ever. On below Sakuru Shivananda Murti ki, and for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. And we can stand for Arati.